Hello to everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode. And today we're talking about confidence. So, confidence and also being a nice guy. And how do we come up with this strategy to be a nice guy, maybe to avoid conflicts or to please or to think that we can gain friendships or romantic relationships with, and how it actually may be backfiring. Also, for me, when I think about the nice guy concept, comes to mind is that it's like a defense. I'm not offending anyone. I'm not expressing myself, and therefore I'm not triggering anyone to challenge me or to disapprove of me and my ideas or my behavior or the self that I am. There are people who are genuinely nice, and most of us are probably genuinely nice, but also there are people who know how to use it and work with it, so their boundaries is still there and they feel very comfortable. I'm charitable, I'm helpful, but to things which are important to me and work for me. But if someone is asking something too much or saying something that offends me, they also know to put a border, a defense, and draw a line. But not all of us know to do it. I myself struggle with it sometimes to say no. Um, and so it's very interesting topic for me. And today I got Dan Munro to talk to us a little bit more about these things and his work. So, Dan, if you can introduce yourself, how did you get to your field? What's your background? That would be great.
Cool. Thanks, man. I've been coaching nice guys since about 2013. And prior to that, I was working in the Department of Corrections. So you might say coaching criminal offenders. And my background essentially is I've been involved in psychology one way or another as an adult, my entire adult life. But my own struggles with nice guy syndrome is really why I'm here now. I discovered that was the name for all of my social problems when I was in my mid-20s. I really struggled with dating and relationships in particular, but also just struggled with never really feeling like I fit in, connected, even though I might have looked popular from the outside. I felt dissociated from everybody. I felt like an alien pretending to be a human, constantly putting on a show, constantly avoiding conflict, deathly terrified of confrontation and arguing, and um, scared of rejection, scared of being seen as a bad person in any way, and not realizing that I was basically putting on an act the entire time to try and prevent people having a negative opinion of me or getting upset in my presence. Once I realized that was my issue, I dedicated myself to fixing it, essentially, because I realized that it just wasn't working for me. It's a good strategy when you're a kid and you're struggling. And if you're in an unsafe environment, it'll get you through the day. But as an adult, it backfires massively. It prevents connections from happening. It destroys your confidence. Just all the things you want, it actually chases them away. And all the problems you're trying to avoid, it causes. It's a nightmare. So I worked on it through myself. And then at the same time I was rehabilitating criminals, I realized I want to do this kind of work, but with other types of people. And that's what led me to start coaching. And that's where I've been doing it ever since.
Amazing. Something interesting. How did you get into working with offenders, and what kind of work did you do there? And yeah, tell us a little bit about that. That's always interesting for me, people who work with prison services and offenders.
Yeah, I had a psychology degree and I didn't know what to do with it because it's kind of worthless. It's not really a qualification you can actually use to get any sort of decent job. You need like a doctorate to be a psychologist and so on. So I had this worthless degree and I was just looking for jobs that considered it to be valuable. And I saw a probation officer come up. Some countries it's just called a parole officer. New Zealand is a probation officer. And it seemed very exciting. The idea of working with criminals, trying to rehabilitate them, manage them while they're in the community. It just seemed thrilling. And at the time, I was aware that I had a massive problem with conflict and confrontation. And I saw this as an opportunity for me to get over that fear. to go work with very difficult, aggressive people in dangerous situations, perhaps. I thought, I need this. It's kind of like if you're obese and you see a gym, you're just like, okay, I need this, right? Like, this is where I'm going to go now. So I went there and turned out to be much more interesting than I thought. I'd just be basically babysitting people and trying to stop them from killing each other. But the work was quite intense rehabilitation. I was having conversations, coaching, essentially, these guys to try and get them to at least reduce how harmful they were. And I had a knack for it. It was something I was good at. I got promoted quickly, and eventually I started to specialize in really high risk criminal offenders, serial killers, murderers, rapists, that sort of thing. The difficulty, of course, with those kinds of offenders is there's very little difference you can make. Their psychology is very ingrained. They've got very low motivation to change. But I could still make some changes. I could make them a little bit less harmful, make their their offending a little less frequent. And I just started thinking, man, if I could do this with people who actually wanted to be here, it would be amazing, right? And so that's why I transitioned. I also had some massive epiphanies while working with criminal offenders. A lot of them would identify as being nice people, which is interesting. They don't all see themselves as a bad guy. A lot of the stuff they do is coming from repressed anger and rage, which is a classic symptom of the nice guy because he never lets it out. And I saw that even though I wasn't really a criminal myself, I don't know, I used drugs a few times, drove over the speed limit, but I wasn't like a master crook. The reasoning and the way their brain functioned when it came to justifying poor behavior is identical to anyone justifying any poor behavior. We call some things crimes and other things not, but that's just an arbitrary choice. People, I don't know, overeating, lying to their partners, gossiping behind people's back, none of that's illegal, but the process they go through to justify their breach of integrity is the same thing a criminal does before he steals a car or beats up his partner or kills somebody. The processing's the same. And I was just really fascinated with the psychology of how we lie to ourselves to do things that we know are wrong. And I was just sort of looking at myself in the mirror, really, just seeing like, I do all of this stuff myself. I'm no better than these guys. I constantly do what I know is wrong to get an instant gratification. And for me, that was the people pleasing. It was, you mentioned it before as a good point. There's such a thing as genuinely nice. What I'd say is there's people who are genuinely generous and kind, and it comes from a place of love. And then there are people who use niceness to manage how they're seen by others. And they are the vast majority of nice people. So most people who appear to be nice, they even tell themselves a story that they're altruistic, that this is just genuine kindness. But it is at least in part a manipulation. It's designed to control how they're seen, to manage impressions, as we call it, so that people like them, talk about them as being a good person, don't want to get into conflict with them, have comfortable emotions around them. It's all really quite selfish. And that's what I realized. Like, the thing I had in common with these criminals is selfishness. Everything I was doing was from my own gains, not really for other people. That was just a story I told myself, So yeah, that's how I got into that work, and that's also how I got out of that work. And I realized, like, this work's really fun, but 90% of these guys hate my guts and don't want to be here. I need to find people who actually want this stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, and it makes so much sense how you shifted from one to another, and also, um, of course, most uh, nice guys, nice people. I know it's also many women that I know also have this um pleasing others, people pleasing. It's I can see it in them, and yeah, it's very similar mechanism. They just want to avoid conflict and just not to be seen as someone in the room. They like to be the small thing at the back of the room. I'm invisible. Um, so yeah, I can see how suppressing who we are and doing things which we don't want to do, um, it can backfire and can come in anger outburst and doing crazy things, maybe for attention, maybe just to release the steam. So that makes a lot of sense. And something that I've noticed with people who know to be genuine with themselves and others, and of course it's not always, but I know some people that come from many brothers and sisters family, so many siblings they grew up with that are a year and a half older than them, a year and a half younger than them, and there's many like five or six or eight, or I know a guy with 18 brothers and sisters. And you see the way he is with himself when he's in a bar, in a restaurant, when he's talking to girls. Is the most inspiring thing ever. And I think human, of course, we're a social animal, and we grew up in communities where now we're very isolated. Not only we may be a lone child, we not also not have a cousin or an aunties and uncles around us so much. So if we're not getting along well with friends in school, but we don't also have the wider family around us, then it's very alone and we don't have those interactions. So when I see the way he interacts, it's like um, for him talking to a girl is like he had, I don't know, 10 sisters and he grew up with them growing up from a child to teenagers with the hormone changes and then from to becoming young ladies. It's nothing. He can go on the street, hello, and just start talking as if he know her and a friend. And or if we're in a bar, he would like go to a random person and say cheers. And he does it so confidently and with a smile so naturally. No one had to teach him that. He knew that we're all in the same. And when you see it from such young age, you really normalize interacting to people. And with the time now being on our phones, it's even more isolating than ever. A lot of young people struggle to do a face to face, struggle to have a phone call. It's all about messaging or sending memes because that's what they used to. Um, so I'm thinking about that and how our environment, and you talk a lot about childhood and childhood traumas and being a mechanism to um, defend ourselves and protect ourselves. That's what we go into pleasing, not knowing, not learning boundaries. Again, I'm thinking about this guy with a lot of brothers and sisters. He had to have his boundaries because he knew when the bread is put on the table, he's grabbing it because someone else, or if someone touching it, he will smack their hand because, whoa, that's mine. And he's learning to draw boundaries with his toys, with his food, with his space, because there's so many of them. So that's really inspiring for me, those things. Of course, I can imagine it's also a personality thing, and some people are born with more resilience than others. So not everyone is always as successful at putting boundaries and protecting themselves. But maybe you can talk a little bit about how trauma um, affect us and growing up, maybe not making a lot of friends, maybe you're a little bit shy or different to others. Maybe we're more talking to nature, people talking to trees, observing the flowers and insects and how beautiful this is. But children can be mean to someone who does that. And now then isolating and being isolated as a child and maybe having parents who are busy or are having trauma themselves, and so they're mentally not as available and stable as perhaps we would wish, how that can affect someone's future confidence, self-pleasing, and yeah, not knowing to proclaim life and living life.
What I'd suggest is it's not so much about how many people you grow up with in the house, it's about the safety. Particularly, how safe was it for you to express yourself honestly? That will determine the rest. And it almost doesn't matter what type of personality you have, introvert, extrovert, neurodivergent, wherever you land, it depends at an early age how it was received by the others around. If it was well received, both at home and at school, then no matter what type of person you are, you're going to grow up confident with expressing yourself and authentic. You're not going to develop a strategy to hide it. Because that's what people pleasing nice guy syndrome is, essentially camouflage. It's I'm going to hide who I really am behind this thing that you see and that's going to keep me safe. I'm not going to get any attacks. So somebody who's good with boundaries and expressing themselves, every kid starts off doing that anyway. It's whether or not that gets encouraged or discouraged. So, for example, if you're the odd one out, the kid who likes to talk to trees and stuff, that's fine if the other kids are okay with it. If they're not, you learn very quickly, if I'm going to survive at school, I have to pretend I'm not into this, or I have to pretend I'm into the other stuff, or I have to hide away so they don't see me do it, and so on. And it's the same at home. Like, I have some clients who have a lot of siblings, but those siblings tortured and bullied them. So that number of siblings didn't actually help. It became the negative factor. So there's all sorts of, specific traumas that can happen, and I've done huge conversations around that. But generally, if you were to open your mouth and say what you really want and show how you really feel, how likely was that to be received, at least encouragingly? Not necessarily everyone would agree with you, but disagreement wouldn't be something you're scared of. Being seen wasn't something you're scared of. If you grew up in a household where, and you know what, it can start at such a young age that you don't remember. For example, if your parents yelled at you when you were crying as a baby, you have no memory of that. But your first feedback on what you get for expressing yourself was negative and scary. Already that seed's planted. If you were left to cry yourself to sleep rather than comforted because they thought, this is a good method to so on. So you would have stopped crying because you realize, hey, no one cares when I cry. And that even that like 1 year old, that becomes a belief. And if you might have a great home life. So there's some people who aren't, like some of my clients are what you might call compartmentalized nice guys. So it only happens with certain people. So they might go home to their family and they just let it all out. They don't give a shit. But they didn't have that experience at school. So they had support at home. But once they got to school, they got bullied for being autistic or whatever. And so they had to develop a kind of dual personality, the safe person and the unsafe person, and react to each. And that can start to really muddle and warp your identity. You start to not really be sure which one is you, which one isn't. So trauma is basically anything you can't get over. And the tragedy with people pleasing and nice guy syndrome is that the strategy that you use to protect yourself and camouflage yourself from unsafe people backfires terribly as an adult. It's, you're trying to use it to avoid rejection. This thing actually prevents people from connecting with you, which is the same as total rejection. You use it to avoid conflict. This just builds up huge resentment with people, both yourself and others, until eventually it explodes. Or you only attract very, dysregulated people. Nice guys tend to be very attractive to people who are very mentally unwell. So you start to surround yourself with the kind of people who are high conflict, even if it's not with you. They're going to have chaotic lives. They're going to struggle to manage. They're going to be very codependent. So you're going to get into really toxic, fucked up relationships. You're going to have friends that use and abuse you or dump on you like a therapist. So it all backfires. This thing that kept you going through school and, at least reduced the bullying or stopped your father from yelling all the time or whatever. Now it's the thing that keeps you alone. It's the thing that makes you hate yourself. It's the thing that causes overthinking all the time. It doesn't serve a purpose anymore. And that's the main thing people have to realize. What I had to realize is like, this shit doesn't work. It doesn't even please people. Like, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't achieve any goals. And that's where, like, essentially dealing with nice guy syndrome is dealing with trauma. It's like, okay, I have to stop being a kid now because it doesn't work anymore.
And how would you say we can, if someone's watching this and is thinking, am I a nice guy? Am I actually pleasing? What kind of questions can we ask ourselves? And then that will help us determine whether we're doing this, because not everyone is so aware. It can become something that we do for so many years. We just, this is who we are, surely. And if we are, what are the first steps to stop? Do we need therapies? Can we do it ourselves? Is there ways to deal with it?
Yeah, maybe let's start with identifying it, because the problem with nice guy syndrome in particular is it becomes an identity that you're actually proud of. So you start to think, I'm the nice guy, I'm a good person. You even think of it as like a martyr, like I'm the only good person. It's like I'm suffering so that there's a good person in the world. Like I'm going to hold this burden while everyone else is being a selfish jerk. Um, and you became attached to it because it was all you had. You had to make your peace with it, and eventually you became attached to it. So you first have to realize, like, if I was truly genuine and kind, I wouldn't have to tell myself that I am. I wouldn't have to keep like playing the story about what a good person I am. I'd just be one. One of the things, there's a few things to look out for. First off, are you conflict averse? Are you trying to keep the peace? Do you want to appear to be easygoing? Do you try to like moderate other people's conflicts with each other? Do you change your mind if people start getting upset? Do you find yourself just adjusting constantly so that everybody gets along and everything's nice? Would you consider a relationship with no arguments to be a healthy relationship? Would you be proud of yourself for being in a relationship that has no arguments? These are all warning signs that you're too nice. They're signs that essentially the hard thing you have to face is that you're not an honest person. And this is where the nice guy syndrome really fucks people up psychologically, is they're trying to tell themselves, I'm a good person. Now, it's very hard to say I'm a good person and I'm dishonest, because those things don't work very well. So we have to lie to ourselves about being dishonest. We have to say, this is what I really think. This is who I really am. I really don't mind. And we have to constantly like justify the lying to make it sound true, especially the conflict aversion or the rejection and avoidance. So if you find that you are generally, agreeable and get along, but when you're not, you quickly speak up and you're willing to cause awkwardness, you're willing to make someone upset, you're willing to reject someone and get rejected. If you have no real hesitation to that happening, then fine, you're not a nice guy. You're just a pleasant person who has a spine. But if you're like, oh, I have to consider how they're going to react before I decide if I'm going to say this, that's people pleasing. If you're like, I'm worried that they'll not like me. If you find out, for example, that someone doesn't like you and that keeps you awake at night and you figure out how to fix it, if you refuse to get rejected, if you never say anything that somebody can say no to, you're always following their lead. You won't express your sexual attraction, for example. You always play it safe. Then your niceness is probably not as genuine as you'd like to think it is. It is much more likely to be a strategy to avoid any kind of abandonment and rejection, and mostly just the awkward, uncomfortable feeling of being around someone who's unhappy. Right? Nice guys, it's not just so much that they want to be liked and avoid conflict. They just don't want a certain range of emotions to happen in their presence. They'll always try to cheer up someone who's sad, even though they might need to be sad right now. They'll try and fix it. If someone's angry, they'll try to calm them down. If someone's bored, they'll try to entertain them. If someone's anxious, they'll try to encourage them. Like, they can't let people just feel things. They have to fix it all the time because they aren't comfortable being around it. They're worried about it. If this sounds like you, then you're almost certainly in their category. And the real litmus test is, do you ask for what you want directly? Do you go for it even though you know you're going to get rejected? Are you willing to start a fight to stand up for what you believe in? If yes, then go. You're fine, right? But if you find that you have to go through mental gymnastics to talk yourself out of speaking up for yourself, to pretend to yourself that you're okay with everything you're hearing, oh, I see both sides of the story, all that kind of shit, yeah, that just means you're not being honest. You're probably not being honest with yourself first, and that's why it feels like you are being honest with others, is because you've already tricked yourself into believing it's true. You find out, for example, that the girl you're seeing really loves pop music, which you think you hate. And then you start noticing yourself saying like, oh, I don't mind, it's your car, you can play what you want. And, this song's actually all right, and you start trying to like warp your own belief system to match her preferences. Yeah, that's not being honest. It might feel like you're telling the truth, but you're actually warping the truth to suit the circumstances. And that also gives you a pretty big hint as to what the recovery process looks like. Because there's something that obliterates nice guy syndrome, and that is radical honesty. Nice guy syndrome, the application of it requires deception. It requires pretense, manipulation. And if you are just transparently honest about all your thoughts, all your feelings, your true preferences, especially your preferences, what you want and don't want, what you stand for and against, then you are going to have conflicts and you are going to get rejected, and you're just not going to be a nice guy anymore. You can still be a generous guy, a kind guy, thoughtful, considerate guy, but you're not going to be a spineless follower. You're not going to be a risk-averse coward. You're going to be someone who's like, hey, it gets hot, so be it. So ultimately, recovery from nice guy syndrome is a combination of awareness and courage. You have to see how it is that you do it, and it'll be so painful to see that it's everywhere, that every conversation you have is affected by it, that you sit there you're about to write a text message and you realize you're trying to edit the words to get the best possible reaction. You'll realize you're sitting in a cafe a certain way to try and look like you're sitting cool, just in case anyone's watching. And you'll realize this happens all the time. Like, you're just constantly acting whenever other people are observing you. And you'll know it because you feel relief when you're finally alone. You know, you're like, oh, I could stop for a second. Like, this exhaustion that you feel on your bones all the time whenever people are watching. If that goes away, if you get relief when you're alone, if you have this yearning to just not be around people, just so that you don't have to put on the show, well, that'll tell you what's happening. And then the courage to be honest. Now, you're asking about ways through it. I've got to make a point, and this is an opinionated point. A lot of people disagree with me on this. There are many ways to tackle it, but I do not recommend classical therapy. Okay. There's other types, coaching, CBT. There's a few types of therapy that might be okay, especially anything very practical, very challenging your behavior and making it change. But classic therapy, where you just go and talk about yourself and investigate, that actually enhances nice guy syndrome. You'll become attached to the identity. You'll start blaming your parents and your childhood for being this way, so you stop taking responsibility for changing it. Whatever your approach, whether it's by yourself or using some sort of mentor or coach or support system, the focus has to be constantly taking new uncomfortable actions that are socially risky. If the thing does not drive you to do that, then this is not going to help you. Okay, this is the kind of trauma that you fix with action, not with talking. Because talking feeds it. That's the problem. Like, if you just constantly talk about why you're a people pleaser, you'll actually justify doing more of it. Now, that's just my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, you can go do something else, and that's totally fine. But I've been in this space for 20 years, and not once have I seen therapy have an effective result for these guys. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I'm thinking, for example, just a random small example. I'm sitting in a cafe, or if we're sitting in a cafe and there is a dude very loud on the phone for more than 5 minutes. Is it a nice guy? I'll finish my coffee and get out because he's something not right with him. Or do I go and tap on his shoulders? Excuse me, you're in a public space. Do you mind? We can all be here quietly. Now, some people, they're mentally loose and get into a fight. Or more likely, will just tell you fuck off, or he will tell you, sorry about that. And they put the phone off the speaker and speak more calmly. What do you think of these situations where it's not directly like if I'm in a relationship and I'm not expressing, listen, I'm doing all the dishes, I'm doing all the cooking, I'm taking us on holidays, I'm doing everything. I feel this is not a 50-50, a full in. I agree that's one thing that we have to learn to speak up, because that can become very toxic, to bottle all of that. And whether we're in the right or wrong, it doesn't matter. but it's a conflict worth bringing up, have a discussion, iron it out, sort it out. But when one in public where we can leave or we're going to leave anyway in 10 minutes, um, isn't that also a nice guy? Or is it just, it's the world we live in that people, it's better to avoid this situation? What's your take on something like that? Just quickly.
One of the, call it the early phases of recovery, nice guy syndrome, is you have to fight every battle. Now, this does not mean a life sentence of being this way. But because you're not going to be able to trust yourself with your excuses when it comes to a confrontation, you have to have all the confrontations. What I'd say is, should I speak to the guy at the cafe? You can only say no to that if you know that you could speak to him if you really wanted to, that you've proven that to yourself by doing it before. So if this is the first time, if you're like, he's really loud, I've never told someone who's been really loud in public, hey, can you keep it down? I'm not sure I have the courage to do this. Well, in that case, I can't say I have a rational reason for not doing this. It's not that I have to get him to shut up. And if he gets angry, I'll just say, back off. That's fine. The point is, I've recognized there's something I'm too scared to do, and I'm trying to justify and rationalize not doing it. And that's what needs to be challenged. So it's not like you're going to become this person who gets into a fight with everybody who doesn't behave perfectly. It's more like, if I'm scared of speaking up, that's where I need to walk towards. That's the thing. Now, you might be too scared today to go talk to that guy, but don't let yourself lie to yourself about why you're not talking to him. He might be loose, or it's just the way the world is. No. You're too scared. That's all. That's the only reason you're not speaking up. It's the only reason you're not respecting your preferences. You don't have to make this guy stop talking on the phone, but you pretended that you're okay with it by not saying something. Silence is consent, right? So what I'd suggest, if you're in that moment, you're like, okay, I admit it. This is one of those things I'm too scared to do, but I am too scared to do it. Like, I'm not there yet. Just ask yourself, well, how much of it can I do? Can I at least frown and look at him to show I disagree? Can I at least move to another table, obviously, that's further away, because to show that this bothers me? Can I at least respect my preference in some way rather than squashing it down and pretending like everybody else in the cafe is doing? Which shows you how prevalent this problem is because nobody's saying anything to that guy, even though everyone's bothered by it, right? So what we're looking for is not so much that you just become this courageous hero right out of the gate, because you simply won't be brave enough. You earn bravery by doing small, courageous things. And you've got to look for these opportunities to do small, courageous things. And when you're in a real life situation, you have to ask yourself, like, what's at least something small I can do that's on the spectrum of honesty? There's a thing I really want to do is like, bro, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to eat here. Okay, I just don't have that in me. I'm too scared of the consequences. But what if I take it down a couple of notches? Where can I actually get to on this one? What you've got to really, because what I love about this example is every example of possible conflict, being disliked, rejected, your brain is going to come up with a good reason why this time is an exception, why this time doesn't count. And it can do it with anything, including your partner. In fact, it'll do that. It'll say, well, if it was my partner, I'd say something. And then the next day your partner does something, he's like, well, if it was my boss, I'd say something. You're never actually going to say something. And that's why you have to always say something, because you don't know which ones are real. Now, when you know that you've become brave enough to confront anyone, anytime, when you've faced all your greatest demons, you've told your dad that you didn't appreciate his parenting, and you've told your boss that you're going to quit if he doesn't respect you, and you asked out the hottest girl you've ever seen, you're like, I can do all of this stuff now. Now you can decide whether or not you're going to do it. Now you can decide, do I actually give a shit enough to move on this thing? Or, there'll be times where you're like, actually, I prefer the harmony. I can't be bothered with a fight right now. You're only allowed to use that once you know you could if you needed to. Once you know, hey, if this escalates to the point where it requires an intervention, I definitely will. But don't lie to yourself and say, hey, I would if it was something a little bit different. when that's not actually true. And that was the thing with me. Like when I started working with criminal offenders, I was lucky because I was thrown in the deep end. I was forced to uphold laws with very combative, very disagreeable people and very manipulative people who did all the things you're worried are going to happen. You're guilt tripping and saying that you're a bad person and telling other people lies about you, all that stuff you're worried about. I was forced to face all of that very intensely every day. And so it was like training. And at the start, I was a absolute pussy. I was terrified and I let them manipulate me and I backed down a lot. But slowly over time, I just started sort of clawing my way up out of the hole and setting stronger and stronger boundaries. And then eventually I found actually it was setting boundaries with other staff that was far more intimidating. Criminals were easy because they expected it, but staff members that you got to sit next to every day, that's a lot harder. Um, and then I just started looking for opportunities. What's the next thing I'm scared of doing? Right, that's next. Not what's the thing I'm terrified of doing, but what's the thing I'm uncomfortable doing that I haven't done yet? So I'm like, okay, that. What's the thing I haven't said that I probably could say that I'd just be a bit nervous? Okay, I'm going to do that. I'll tell someone I'm stressed. I'll tell someone I don't like their music. I'll tell someone, can you just keep it down a bit? I can't concentrate. And I'll just start ticking off all these things I never say, all these things I've been suppressing my whole life until I get to a point where I'm like, fuck, I think I've done the whole list. There's nothing left. And that's when you know you've recovered.
Amazing. Thank you for that. It's springs a lot of questions, so I want to bring that on. Also want to comment for nice guys that we think, how is she going to think of me if I'm standing up for myself or disagreeing? And I'm lucky I interact with some girls over the years, and both his partners and his friends, and you would see that when you are confident and proclaiming your space and disagreeing, girls are like, okay. They respect, they are attracted to it. And of course, it's always a risk. You can upset someone, they may disagree with you, that's something they cannot accept. And they may not want to interact with you and they may want to leave you, might not be your partner, they want to break up or whatever. And it's a risk. But I I I truly believe being authentic to ourselves long term always pays more than trying to bottling things inside. Um, for various reasons, we may have outbursts, and also how can we be happy and fulfilled when we're not expressing who we are? So that's something small. I wanted to add there, and maybe you can in a minute comment on that. And I was also thinking, let's say we are in a cafe and this guy is very loud on the phone. And I'm thinking, it's a cafe, it's a place that we all want to have a small conversation with our friends or sit in quiet, enjoy. If you're in New Zealand, a pie, or if you're in Portugal, a pastela de nata, and just eat quietly and enjoy your moment. And someone is so loud and so disturbing, and it doesn't matter if they have hearing issue or they're just loud people, we have the right to say, hey, this is a cafe, do you mind keep it down? Always, I think, with a smile, with kindness, with softness, with as gentle as we can. And I'm thinking the worst that can happen, the guy will say, fuck off. And he may try to intimidate us and, of course, be back down. And I often think we think about the worst thing, is going to smack me or fight with me or stab me or something. 99.999% none of that happens. And I even think I've been jumped on in London just walking, getting a bicycles and been robbed a couple of times. Yeah, it wasn't nice. I was bruised. My rib was cracked at one point. But I thought back, it felt great. Um, so I don't encourage ever fighting, but we are an animal. This is nature. And sometimes it's inevitable. We try to avoid it as much as possible. And 99.9%, this will never happen to us. But I think what is the price if we don't stand up for ourselves that little bit? Have a lifetime of misery, of suppression, of anger repressed, rather than one time being smacked or punched. And even if your nose got broken, thankfully, in most places where we live, they can put it back together. Um, and again, as a guy, if I think most girls, they will date a guy with a totally crooked nose, with a totally scar on his face. They don't see the way we judge. We want the girl to look, most of us, like a doll, really perfect. But most girls, we can look like a gorilla. It doesn't, they will, oh, it's so nice. It's got nice hands. Or like, they would like something that is totally, we don't understand. And that's awesome. And it's brilliant. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But of course, we want to avoid fights and we want to approach, if we decide to, as gently as softly. And I want to take all your things on that. I'm just going to throw a few more things. Another things that is I found in my early 20s is that I have a complex. Growing up, I was in a special need class with 10 other um, children with learning difficulties, with ADHD, dyslexia. I think we had maybe orphan children in the class or adopted children that came from difficult backgrounds. And the fights we used to have in that class, um, it was scary. Before I went to the special need class, I was in a class with 30, 40 other children. I was a little bit bothering others, bullying, I guess, to a degree, very unfortunately. Um, and then when I got to this special need class, and there were children who were much, much stronger than me, like much stronger. Um, and I remember after the first day in that class, they were all chasing me because they already been in that class for 2, 3 years, and I just got jumped into it. And we children with flex muscles, we wanted to test. And at the end of the day, they decided that little shit, we're going to teach him a lesson. And they were throwing rocks at me, like real rocks and sticks. And I was not used to fight with rocks. Maybe with sticks a little bit, but not like proper wooden planks. Maybe like bamboo that are flexible and not going to smash anyone's head. But these kids, they meant blood. And I was like, okay, I'm going to count it back down now because they are not messing with me. So I knew my place there, for good and for bad. But then in my early 20s, I came across the 7 habits of highly effective people. So first seek to understand, then to be understood, and also how to make friends and influence people. I think it was Dale Carnegie. Again, be kind of a carpet, kind of, and then you will get something, you will understand, you will connect with people. So I think there's a lot of confusion as well in the literature. And of course, all the Me Too movement, which a lot of it is very justifiable. And don't talk to girls, don't approach anyone, don't bother anyone. Also, I'm coming from the Middle East into Europe when I was 18. So that was a big culture shock. There's no touching people, there's no proximity, it's very separated. So that also had a big effect. Also, I lived in the UK, and the British, I think, are not to express their feeling, kind of. And whoa, 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 we don't talk about it here, man. Under the carpet, please. And I was like, okay. So there was a lot of these culture differences. So basically, if you can remember anything I just ranted about, if you can comment on, that would be great.
Well, there's actually a theme there. Risk. This is an important aspect of nice guy syndrome, is a misunderstanding of risk. We'll say something like, that person's a risk to confront because they're high risk of getting upset. We're talking about that like something bad's going to happen, but them getting upset is not actually an injury. We perceive it to be. I worked with a lot of criminal offenders who are very violent, and it's the people who try to avoid violence that are most attractive to them. I mean, they're not looking to have a challenge. They want to win the fight. So they're going for the guy who's least likely to fight back, not the guy who's most likely to. So the idea that you playing it safe and kind of avoiding conflict is safe and less risky, it makes sense on paper. It doesn't play out that way in real life. You look at the Me Too movement, the guy just goes for it boldly, just says, hey, I'm attracted to you, I want to say hi. he's not going to end up in court. It's the guy who has to try and creep around that because he doesn't want to get seen for what he really is. That's the guy who's going to step over the line without meaning to. I realized that in my mid-20s because I was so scared of rejection sexually. I was very indirect. And it's that place that has the most risk of confusion. There's the most risk of lines being crossed. You're never directly talking about consent, for example. You go to have sex with someone, nobody's talking about condoms. Like, everything's very sneaky and indirect. That's not safe. That's unsafe. The guy goes up to girls like, I think you're hot. You want to come home with me? As long as he respects a no, he's very safe. But if he pushes and pressures her, of course. But nice guys aren't actually at risk of being this person who comes on too strong. They're actually the risk of being the person who comes on weak. The person comes on indirect, confused, messy. That's far more risky. But because we think somebody else having emotions is a threat, when we say risk, we mean that. We mean them disliking us. Somebody disliking you is not a risk. Somebody suspicious of your intentions is a risk, right? And so if you can get over the idea that being disliked or upsetting people is actually a threat, because this is the big thing. As a kid, that was a threat because it was attached to genuine circumstances. The kids are going to throw rocks at them. But when you're an adult, the rock throwing stops, and you're still behaving as if an upset kid is going to throw a rock at you. And this is why it starts to backfire in your adulthood, is because the circumstances have changed. The world's changed completely. And one of the big things you have to do when you start this journey of recovery is question everything you're afraid of. I'm afraid you'll get upset. Why? Why are you afraid of that? What exactly is so bad that's going to happen? She doesn't like me. So? She never speaks to me again. So? She tells other people that I'm a bad person. So? You're so sure that those are bad things that you've never even questioned, well, let's play out the dominoes here. That happens and that happens and that happens. Where's the injury? Everybody hates me. Okay, I could just move to another city. Problem fucking solved. And even if they do hate me, have you ever seen how somebody who hates you behaves? They avoid you. That's it. Worst case scenario, the person won't come anywhere near you. And this is what you're afraid of? The guy who wants to beat you up will come towards you. The guy who hates you will just be like, oh, this guy's here, I'm going somewhere else. Right? So we're afraid of these things without any real thought to the consequences. And so we call them risky, and then we behave in a way that's actually risky in order to avoid this thing that's not even a threat. It's what I call around the corner fear. I just imagine the block I live on. If you're walking down the street and you hear some horrible noises coming from around the corner, growling dog, for example, and you're like, fuck that, I'm not going around that corner. So you never see what's making the noise. You never go to find out. And this is what guys do, like, oh, she looks like she's a bit bored, so I won't go talk to her. You never get to find out what she actually feels. She might be nervous because she's attracted to you. It looks the same as bored. And because you never find out, you never go around the corner, you keep validating this fear of something that you've never actually gone to find out. Like you said, even getting beaten up. I had a huge fear of violence in my 20s. I went to a pretty rough high school. There were a lot of fights. And it's funny because I played rugby the whole time too. So I'm constantly doing controlled violence. No problem at all. But the thought of getting into a fight scared the shit out of me. I mean, people don't tackle you and fucking climb all over you in a fight. But they did in rugby, and it was messed up. And then I got in a couple of fights, and I got my ass kicked. I wasn't close to fair. Like I said, violent people aren't looking for a fair fight. So it'd be like 5 guys jumped me. I didn't even know what was happening until it was over. And I didn't pick up on the fact that I'm actually okay with this. What am I scared of exactly? When Jackass came out, me and all my friends did terrible things to each other. We're jumping off roofs into bushes and stuff. I had no broken bones until Jackass came out, and then I broke 3 in 1 year. And I'm worried that some guy's going to beat me up. I've never had a broken bone in a fight. So my fears didn't actually make sense. You go out and go rejection therapy. I do this with my clients all the time. You just basically go and get rejected 100 times on purpose. And after it, you're like, they didn't even slap me or anything. The worst case is somebody frowned at me and walked away. Why am I scared of that? Somebody at work thinks I'm a dickhead. Here's the thing. all those things you're afraid of as a people pleaser are already happening anyway. People already judge you. People already think you're a bad person. There's someone out there who you think likes you and they actually hate your guts and they talk shit about you behind your back all the time. That's already happening. All the things you're terrified of and trying to prevent, in fact, your people pleasing provokes it. There are people who hate people pleasers and they can see right through it. And so as you're going out there trying to be nice, there are people like, oh, just watching you do that. And you know that this is true because you can see other people doing it. You know when people are faking and you hate them for it, or you loathe them, or you pity them. You're not the only one who can see through the act. Everybody else can too, right? And so here's the thing is you're going to be hated either way. You got to ask, well, what do I want to be hated for? I remember there was a big breakthrough for me where being very indirect and tricky and so on, I got a girl back to my house. And this is where the idea of consent, Me Too and everything. So I'm at the house, I'm like, I basically pretended to be someone to get her here. What has she consented to exactly? And I had this big moral dilemma. I'm like, if I have sex with her, she's having sex with a guy who doesn't exist. I made him up. The real guy, she might not have come home with the real guy. So can I really say that she consented? Not to mention we're both drinking, right? And so I came to realize that, like, just getting laid is not what I'm about. I want to be liked for who I am. This doesn't count. I'm someone who's never paid for sex because it's not that I look down on prostitutes or anything. It's just I wouldn't trust that they actually like me. So what's the point? That's how my mentality works. And in that night, I actually slept on the floor and very annoyed her. You know, I said no to sex, which was a huge deal for me. But it's like, no, this isn't right. I don't want to be liked for being something I'm not. And I realized, like, I'd rather be hated for who I am. Because how many people have not liked me because I was being fake and they might have liked the real me? How many times have I missed out on good connections by trying to get good connections? What if people actually like me for who I am? And I realized I had to take this risk of like stepping off a cliff where if I'm who I really am, maybe nobody will like me. The thing is, all the people who think they like me now like an act, so nobody likes me anyway. I'm already there. So if I spend a year being genuine, what's the loss? I end up nobody likes me now. What the fuck's the difference? At least I won't have to pretend. And I just had this kind of breakthrough. I'm like, if I'm just brave enough to show people what I really think, really feel, what my stance is on everything, my opinions, if I just do what I feel like doing rather than going with the crowd, like, what might happen in a year if I just did that? And is it really a risk? So I got to tell you, when you're talking about risk, I've got these, there's a guy on my YouTube channel who just comments negatively on every video, right? And you get that when you run a channel for long. Anyway, he mentioned something about that. I did a short video about standing up to people or something. And he said, that's fine if you've got nice people, but you wouldn't want to stand up to my wife. The risk is just too high. And I'm like, risk of what? Her getting upset, her leaving you? What about the risk of staying with someone who's like that? How do you not think of that as a horrible risk? Because that's what I saw. I realized, like, my people pleasing was bringing certain people into my life. I was like, oh my God, what if I have a life sentence with these people? Because I can't, like, a life sentence with someone who disrespects my boundaries or doesn't invest in the friendship or, like, is wildly chaotic every time I ask for what I want. Like, isn't it worse to spend decades with someone like that and eventually get divorced and cheated on and all that stuff anyway? Wouldn't it be better to have an uncomfortable conversation now? Like, what do we mean when we say risk? And this is at the heart. This is why I'm glad you brought this up. This is at the heart of nice guy syndrome, is taking the short-term payout for the long-term devastation, right? The misery, the cost of these short-term bits of pleasure that you get from people, the short-term little pieces of approval and validation, means divorce or loneliness forever. It means midlife crisis. It means existential crisis. It means you get to 50 and you're like, who the fuck am I? I've wasted my life. Nihilism, depression, suicide. Just because you wanted to make sure that the person at work didn't think you were a bit awkward? Like, really? Is that really worth it? Because it's the other way is the reverse, which is I'm going to go talk to the guy at the cafe is too loud and he's going to shout at me and I'm going to be really embarrassed. But when I'm 50, I'm going to really love who I am. Right? And I'm only going to be surrounded by people who are an excellent fit for me that I don't have to try at all. They just love me. Even if I think I'm boring, they don't. Like, it's just perfect. Right? That's the trade off. Nice guys are just unwilling to make the in the moment emotional trade off for the long term quality of life. And they just don't know that they're making that trade off. Well, I say they don't know, but if they're still watching this at this point and they realize that their life's not going exactly the way they want it to, then maybe they already know what trade off they've made, and maybe it's time to switch.
Thank you so much for that. Um, it's really in line with my thinking, and I'm really happy that you do the work that you do. Um, and we need people doing your work because it's something that we're not aware often of where we take in our lives by just wanting to be the nice guy that society tried to show us these days that we should be. Um, and I do feel it's in a societal level that yeah, don't bother people, don't talk about your emotions, don't express yourself, just respect others, respect all the time, everyone. But we have to say respect everyone, but don't trample on your feelings. That's also very important. Um, Before I let you go, there's a lot more we can talk, but we'll probably have to have another episode. For me personally, sometimes I will have things running through my head that I've been through the day at night before I fall asleep, and I would think, how could I have acted better? That bothers me. Why didn't I speak up? Or did I offend them when I said that? How can we deal some tips before we go to sleep and with things running in our minds?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge amount of work all up, but honesty will do a lot of that work for you. If you always speak your mind and you know that everyone knows who you really are, a lot of that overthinking goes away because you're killing all the what ifs. Okay. Now, in the transition from sort of nice guy to confident, it's quite hellish because you have both. You'll be working on honesty and you'll still care what people think, and so you'll be doing a lot of overthinking, right? So you'll be honest, you'll get a bad reaction, then you're worried that the bad reaction is bad. But a lot of overthinking comes from deep down knowing that you might have missed out on something because you weren't genuine. And when you miss out on something because you were genuine, it doesn't hurt as much. Like if I go up and I tell a girl I'm attracted to you and she goes, "No thanks, I'm not interested." That doesn't sting as much as not talking to her and wondering what if. Because there's closure when you're honest. When you go and say everything, you're like, okay, that one definitely doesn't like me, rule that out. That's a good job for me, I've figured that out, and so on. And you don't have to wonder what reality aligns for you. But when you're being fake, even when you get a good result, you have to wonder. So you might actually find someone really likes you at work, but you know it's because you're putting on this act. So you don't get closure because you don't know if they really like you or not. You're always going to doubt it. You're always going to have an insecurity in that friendship. When they don't text you back, you're going to be like, oh my God, yeah, they don't really like me and so on. Whereas if somebody you've got a genuine connection with doesn't text you back, you just like ring them like, oi, text me back. What the fuck? Like you don't have to worry or think about it. You just challenge them and so on. So there's a lot more that's required to deal with overthinking and rumination at night. It's lots of brain patterns that have been reinforced over time. But I was amazed at how much just my sleep and everything improved with honesty. I would just go to bed and I was just like, there's no open loops. I said everything I had to say. All the results are the final results. I don't have to wonder. I know what's going to happen. It's happened already. And if you're thinking like, something's plaguing you and it just sits in your mind, just ask yourself, what honesty would put this to rest? What do I need to say and who do I need to say it to bring closure to this? And usually an answer will come up, a very uncomfortable answer. and you realize, oh, that's why this is sticking in my head, because I could do that, but I haven't. See, like, rumination comes when we know we haven't done everything we could do yet. Acceptance comes when you know you've done everything you could do. Where you're like, this is genuinely out of my hands now. Like, I can't think of a better thing than I've already done. And a kind of like peace or resolution, even if the outcome is unpleasant. You're like, it's done now. This is often why people go and confess their crimes to the police, even though they're not a suspect. It's they can't live with themselves. They'd rather go to prison honest than live out in the free world with this guilt, right? And it's the same, like for most nice guys, you've just got so many bottled up resentments, so many little cuts that you didn't say anything about, and now you're bleeding from a thousand cuts. And you don't even need to get like compliance. Say there's somebody who's a bit loud at work. They can stay loud and it won't bother you so long as you said something about it. He's like, dude, you're so loud. And he's like, what? I can't hear you, because he's got a hearing problem. You're like, all right, just stay loud then. I get it. I've said my piece. Nothing has to actually change. And that's the great thing with confrontation, I learned, is confrontation is not an attempt to control somebody else. This isn't like a game you have to win. Confrontation is about self-respect. I'm going to say my preference. And you'll find that doing that is nearly all the work done. Like if they don't comply, you're like, I don't actually care. I just have to say it. There are only a few times where, no, I actually need that change in behavior. This situation is unbearable. It's usually the dishonesty that's unbearable, the faking, the pretense. It's fucking unbearable. And this is what leads you eventually to not caring what other people think. Like, it's amazing to me. I used to think about what other people think of me all day long, constantly assessing, hypervigilant, constantly trying to figure out not just what they were thinking about me, but how to improve that, how to make them think even better things about me and feel even more pleasure around me. And then I started being honest, and I realized, say, like, I can't control what people think or feel. If I'm honest, it's just, I be honest and the world falls apart. Like, I can't do anything about it. And once I realized that I can handle that happening, that I can handle people not liking me, I can handle awkwardness, I can handle people getting upset, I can handle a no, I can handle saying a no. Like, once I realized I can just be around someone who doesn't like me and nothing bad happens, then I didn't have to manage it anymore, and the caring what people thought just went away. I was like, I'll just let them think whatever they think, and I'll just work with the people who like me and avoid the ones I don't. It's fucking easy, right? Sounds easy now, but I'm talking about like 7 years of hard work, going back and forth, lots of relapsing, lots of tough times, and that's why I do the coaching. Is I didn't have someone who could make that go quicker for me. 7 years of doing that was too long. I needed someone who could make it happen in a month, so that's why I do what I.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to leave links in the description below of your classes, book, and how to reach out to you for help, and also your YouTube channel. Very helpful. I think for now, that's all I have on my mind. I think it's been a really great chat, and everyone's enjoyed it. So thank you so much, Dan Munro, and I hope to see you soon.
No worries, man. Thanks for the chat. I'll catch you later.